Howdy, folks. Welcome to Redneck Gone Green. I'm David Cobb. I'm your host. I am the Redneck, and you bet I've gone green, and I'm trying to convince you to do it too. A reminder, as we always do, and that is that when we say go green here on this program, we mean that in a multiple of ways. The first and most important way is deep ecology, not merely conservationism, not merely environmentalism, but an understanding of the interconnectedness of all of life, that whatever we do to this web of life, we are ultimately doing to ourselves. And frankly, whether you come at that understanding through a deeply spiritual eco-feminist perspective, or you come at that perspective or analysis through a hard scientific approach, or like me, you say they are both true, the fact is we are interconnected with each other and all life itself. And the reality is the way human society is currently organized around a racist, sexist, class oppressive system, and I mean capitalism, white supremacy, heteropatriarchy, settler colonialism, we are literally destroying the planet faster than Mother Earth can replenish it. We've got to get back to the balance that existed when all humans were living in right relationship and in balance with life. The second way we mean green is Green Party, because I am an unapologetic Green Party member. And by unapologetic, I mean I am proud to be a Green Party member because I know that the problem is that the Democratic Party leadership are fundamentally neoliberals. They are in bed with the right wing. They are in agreement about the broad parameters of how power and society will operate. So now, having said that, I work with progressive Democrats, socialists, and people who don't fool with elections all the time, but I do not make any apologies for the fact that I believe we have to break from the leadership of the Democratic Party, understanding that rank and file Democrats are infinitely more progressive than the neoliberal leaders of that party. So it's with that broad context and a reminder that I'm really excited about this show, because on this show today, we are going to be talking with two people who get shit done. We'll be joined by Kali Akuno of Cooperation Jackson. He's the co-founder and current executive director of Cooperation Jackson, arguably one of the most advanced efforts to build a liberated zone within the United States. And whether you talk about it as Zapatismo, whether you talk about it as however you talk about it, at the end of the day, this is a group of people who are trying to meet concrete needs within an explicitly racist, sexist, class oppressive society and build real liberation. Kali Akuno, welcome to Redneck Gone Green.
Pleasure to finally be here. We've been trying to get a regular thing going now for about 3 months, and so we've had some issues, and we're actually having some issues today, but hopefully we'll overcome those. But it's an honor and a privilege to be here.
Well, thank you so much. And I got to say, I've been knowing Kali Akuno now for coming on almost 20 years, I think. And Kali has a long history from the U.S. Executive Director of the U.S. Human Rights Network. He and I worked together on the National Planning Committee of the U.S. Social Forum. He was a leader in the Hurricane Katrina relief effort. And now, of course, he's with Cooperation Jackson. But I gave you that backstory as a way to bring in our second guest today, who is Mchelle Eddlman McCormick. Mchelle Eddlman McCormick is the director of Cooperation Vermont. She actually met Kali Akuno during those Hurricane Katrina efforts. She was on the ground, truly getting shit done in the midst of a crisis. And she has been a guest before. She's a guest now. Mchelle, welcome back to Redneck Gone Green.
So good to be back and to be in a space virtually with two of my favorite people. So this is going to be super fun.
Well, thank you. You know just how to talk to me, lady. Look at here, y'all. We're going to actually jump right into it because for those who don't know, I do want to give them a chance, Kali, for you to kind of lay out Cooperation Jackson. Now, I know you've written a whole book on this. In fact, 2 books, Jackson Rising and then Jackson Rising Redux. So I'm going to challenge you to give us the thumbnail version of what the hell took you out to Jackson, Mississippi? What's the program? What's the experiment at Jackson?
Well, let's see if this internet is going to work with me today. It seems like it's acting up a bit on my end, so I'm hoping that it's clear on the other end and everybody gets the message all the way through. So I'll give a very abbreviated version, so it's not too choppy if that is the case. But you asked, what got me here, and politics what got me here. And that was came here to try to redirect the politics of this municipality and set up basically a base area for Black liberation under the banner of the New African Independence Movement, for us to execute a particular strategy and program, one of which I was instrumental in helping to form, but definitely not was not the sole kind of architect of the thought. And this was the Jackson Kush Plan, which we publicly announced in 2012. So I came here to execute that plan and to try to build a radical base area, for not only the Black liberation movement, but the movement overall for eco-socialism, to have a base area from where we could practice, experiment, and ultimately grow from, right, through a series of kind of confederations of other similar projects in other kind of municipalities or regions taking on kind of a similar approach and building from the ground up a transformative program. So that's what got me here. That is why I'm still here. How I came to Cooperation Jackson in particular to start founding that, and this is our 10th anniversary, so everybody knows May Day will be our official 10th birthday. We started the organization on May Day intentionally because we wanted to demonstrate the synergy and the connection between co-ops and the union movement as an overall instrument of working class self-organization, which is how we see cooperatives, and are trying to build class-conscious cooperatives very insistently on our effort in Cooperation Jackson. But I came here to work on the overall project, but then as some things kind of narrowed down in identifying some gaps, and the area where we had the greatest gap and the greatest need within the overall strategy of the Jackson Kush Plan was establishing a firm solidarity economy. So that's what led myself and many others to build Cooperation Jackson, to really take care of that particular end, fulfill that particular end of the Jackson Kush Plan. And so this is 10 years in that experiment, trying to make that happen.
And so thank you so much for that big picture overview. And y'all, for folks who may not be as familiar with Cooperation Jackson as I am, and Kali, I'm going to put myself on the spot and invite you to grade my papers and make sure I get this right, because I remain stunned, literally in awe of, in 10 years, what y'all have accomplished. So looky here, y'all. When Kali Akuno describes the idea of meeting people's needs for housing and food and building worker-owned cooperatives, let me share with you what in 10 years this group of serious get-shit-done revolutionaries have accomplished. First, Cooperation Jackson, through their Fannie Lou Hamer Community Land Trust, owned 52 properties across West Jackson, the heart of Black Jackson, one of the most economically depressed and anguished places, but they have bought 52 properties. And check this out, y'all. They own those properties outright, unencumbered by debt. But wait, there's more, because of those, they already have 6 operating with single-family homes that are operating as actual housing cooperatives, taking that housing off the commodity market. They've got people living in those houses. They've also got a number of houses that are in the process of being reconstructed, rehabilitated. And wait, there's more, because some of those parcels are actually being currently operating as farms, operating worker cooperative farms using agroecology and indigenous practices to through the Freedom Farms Worker Cooperative. But wait, there's still even more because 6 of those are commercial sites. They've got a community center, the Bagaloon Community Center, 8,000 square feet. I think, reckon if that's where I'm actually seeing you right now, Kali.
That's right.
They've also got a community production center of 12,000 square feet. It's got 3D printers, laser cutters, etc. They've got another 8,000 square foot building that is in the process of being turned into a recycling center that will be run by a worker-owned cooperative. They own a strip center on basically about a half a block that is going to be the site of a People's Grocery Store. And they've got a contiguous 8-acre site that is being developed for a self-sufficient eco-village that can have anywhere up to 32 units of communal living and basically off-the-grid living. So, Kali, did I basically capture all of that?
You captured it very well. You know, if I would say grading your papers, I would give you an A+ for that one. So you did very, very well.
Well, I've been working on it, and longtime listener Dave writes in, David, you could sell kitchen knives on cable. Wait, there's more. Makes me very happy that you caught that, David. That was a very intentional reference. And for those of you not of our generation, look it up. So with that, I'm going to shift over to Cooperation Vermont, because what I know is that Cooperation Jackson intentionally incubated Cooperation Vermont. And Mchelle, I'm going to kick it to you and say, what the hell's a Florida girl doing in Vermont?
Yeah, I ask myself that sometimes also, because coming from southwest Florida up to this climate was quite a shift. But it's part of, a strategy that has started, generations before me, of trying to take a generational approach to planning for, liberation work and revolutionary work, in that, what we need to seed today for the future is also the work that we need to be doing. Because if we need, a fruit-bearing tree in 20 years, we need to plant that seed now. And the realities of climate change that we are already in the middle of the fallout from are only going to get worse. And I think that we are reaching an all new precipice in this country politically, where climate migration is already happening, but mostly for the folks who can afford to do so. Political migration is already happening, also mainly for the folks that can afford to do so. But I believe that we're going to come to a point where it's not just going to be the folks who can afford to do so. And so what are we doing now to create the possibility of a better way forward for migration than what we have now in our country? This bioregion, not just by us, but by, lots of sources, have projected that this area is going to be much more climate resilient moving forward. That doesn't mean that there aren't going to be impacts. It doesn't mean there aren't going to be, changes. We're already seeing some of those impacts, and they have been difficult for sure. But overall, it's slated to be more resilient. And there is also a culture here of resiliency. People have, mad skills, and there's also, a deeply rooted, we would call it mutual aid, but a culture of that here as well. And so what can we do now to prepare for the future, so that, this area doesn't look like the U.S.-Mexico border does today?
So, Mchelle, thank you for that, because what I want to do is take this moment then to say, I know that, like, Kali introduced me to you, right? Kali introduced us together, right? And what I've discovered is that you were on the ground in New Orleans during the Katrina relief efforts. And I want you to actually talk about what you experienced there, what you saw there, and what made you so committed to throwing down with Cooperation Vermont as a sister organization with Cooperation Jackson?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. My political arc of awareness and, you know, where I've come to today has been an arc. I mean, I grew up a military brat. Both my mom and my dad were in the Army. I grew up on military bases, and certainly didn't grow up with this particular politic. But, you know, I had a level of awareness just from like life and situational things that brought me to a particular place. And then I went to college and it brought me to a particular place, and then to graduate school. And I could say, you know, I probably had some like pretty progressive-esque, mostly probably liberal political leanings leading up to Hurricane Katrina and being in the lower Ninth Ward. And in that moment, just a surge of deep awareness and reality that the system wasn't broken. The system didn't need fixing. There was nothing that we needed to do to like tweak things, that it was literally designed to do this. And that this was a sacrificed community. And for me, there was just no going back, right? Like, once I had that clarity and that awareness that it was literally capitalism that was at the root of all of this, and that the governmental structures in our country were just not for us, I had to really reposition myself to figure out a way to do work moving forward. And I was really fortunate in that same space and same time to have met Kali, and I think really actually helped to shape, you know, my trajectory in moving forward. And I was telling the story of the very first time that Kali and I met each other. It was a very particular situation, and I was quite sure that I was not going to like him, and was happy if he wasn't going to like me either. It was unfortunately a confrontational moment that I wasn't, you know, aware of who he was. But then the first time I really, really met him, when he introduced himself in an even more contentious moment, you know, he was somebody that always acted with integrity. And I can say that, you know, that has always been the case. And so I've been able to, like, on a personal level, you know, trust that transparency and that integrity and a real commitment to the movement. Not that any of us ever get anything always right, but the intention is always there. And so, you know, when the opportunity to come and seed this project in Vermont became, you know, a possibility, I knew that it was going to be something that I would be supported in doing.
And in fact, because I recognize where you are, you're actually, I know, on the second floor of the Marshfield Village store, ain't you? Because I've had the privilege of being there. So what I'm going to do is we've got a clip that actually talks about how the Marshfield Village store was basically saved. And I want you to set this clip up with just a couple of words, Mchelle. What are we about to watch?
So we were looking for a way to kind of start the project, and there was a couple of options that we had started with that didn't really seem like they were going to come to fruition in the way that we needed them to, especially with the expediency of the work that we're trying to do here, because things are moving fast. And the opportunity that, you know, this was the store that I would bring my son to catch the bus. And then one day there was just a sign that was like, for sale by owner, in the window of the town's really only store. There's a small gas station with a little gas station convenience in town as well. But this is the, you know, community's general store and deli. And it's just like a hub for the whole, you know, community. Everybody comes in and out of here. And I was like, this is it. Right. I mean, this provides some additional, you know, housing for our folks as well. and above the store, and some office space for the work that we do. And then the ground floor, being this 1,800 square foot general store and deli, was a way for us to demonstrate in real time rather than just saying and talking about, our principles, to really enact them and do it in a way that was central to the community so that they would get to know who we are rapidly. In a small town, especially. I was going to say, in a small town, especially, you could be here for 20 years and know a handful of people at best. But I would say that I know most people around here now, and they certainly know who I am, good or bad.
And hit it, Jack. Let's see this clip.
The store is really very much of a hub for the community.
That's why Mchelle Eddlman McCormick and others fundraise to save and secure the store under a new business model.
We're definitely motivated to try and preserve what was here because we understand innately how much of a lifeline these village stores are to our rural communities.
The employee-owned model will allow 15 employees after 12 months that have 500 hours put in to get partial stake in the business.
I'm always excited to come into the store.
While most of the store is staying the same, they're also focusing on buying local.
We do really want to make this a very inclusive and welcoming place for all folks, for out-of-towners, for BIPOC folks, for the local folks as well.
The new employees that will eventually turn into owners are looking forward to building a business that will last for generations.
The store is such the heart of motion.
So
it was unfortunate that they cut him off because Jack, he's probably been working here for maybe almost a good 8 years. This was his first job in high school. He grew up in Marshfield, and then he became one of our worker owners, was the front end manager. And anyway, it's a shame they cut him off because he's great.
So, Kali, I want to bring you into this conversation now because the store goes for sale, and actually Cooperation Jackson steps in to purchase it from Jackson, Mississippi. So, tell our viewers and listeners about how that came about, why the decision, and then what y'all are doing with that building.
Let me correct it. I don't think that's totally the correct way to describe it. Per the overall kind of transition program that Mchelle spoke about that we are collectively looking into. We have been doing and are still conducting a lot of research on, land that might be available to be decommodified or put into a community land trust. So we have been looking for something to kind of establish, in effect, a base area, right? For there to be some housing for several folks to probably make a transition up that way, or at least, have some space to kind of go back and forth, myself being one of those people planning on doing it and trying to execute some level of that over the past couple of years. And it was Mchelle who really had scoped the work out on this particular spot, and it built a relationship with the owners, the past owners, to explore it. And an opportunity came up wherein a comrade was willing to make a donation to help a kind of a transition. And initially they were looking at doing like a personal transition. And me and my family said, no, that's not how we aim to do business or conduct business or to want to suit the overall objectives. We would definitely like a place to land, but we want something for it to be collectively owned and controlled and put into a broad democratic process within the community. So, they got the message and rolled with that, and then we were able then to secure it. Now it just had to go through, the purchase had to go through Cooperation Jackson because we were just in the basic stages of incubating Cooperation in Vermont. It wasn't a full-blown kind of birth entity with its own nonprofit, et cetera, then. And so we said we would play the role of kind of being a steward till such time as we can do a transition of that property to the community in Vermont. And I'm happy to report that we are actually in the process of making that transition now. So, if anything, I hope folks, understand kind of what our principles were and how we utilized the instruments that we had available to kind of seize on a particular opportunity, but how we are always been intentional about transitioning that over to local and regional control, and we're following through on that principle.
And thank you for that clarification, and also the degree of transparency and clarity on it. Mchelle, I want to circle back with you because y'all have already secured the store. It's still operating as a general store, but now you have successfully transitioned it to a worker-owned cooperative business. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's been an interesting maybe experiment. I'm not aware, and I would love to hear if other folks out there know of similar processes. But normally, a worker-owned cooperative is formed because a group of people want to work together and do a thing, and have similar and or complementary skill sets in a particular industry, and they're like, okay, let's form a business, and we're going to make it a worker-owned cooperative. Or there are the conversions where the owner is looking to sell the business and the workers organize to purchase the business and convert it to a worker-owned cooperative. In this case, it was movement folks who purchased a business and then was like, this is now a worker-owned cooperative. And so we had to do a lot of, education, of course, around like, well, what is a worker cooperative? Why is a worker cooperative? And then go through the process of like collaboratively, designing a set of bylaws and operating agreement reflective of a worker-owned cooperative with the folks who are going to be involved. And then, a way for onboarding, to occur. So yeah, I mean, it's been for me a little on the experimental side, and would certainly welcome any input from folks who have been through a similar process. But it's happening, and the business is going well. I mean, we're really well embedded in the community, and I would also say that it just occurred to me as Kali was talking that when the store was for sale, the current, the most previous owners who sold it to us had other offers, a particularly aggressive one at that. But they had made the determination that despite, those other offers and the really assertive one, that they wanted to sell it to us because they actually really liked the vision that we had for the store and really wanted to protect it as a community-based asset.
And speaking of community-based assets, because I want to make sure, because there's so much to say, but of course, while you were converting it to a worker-owned cooperative, folks who are paying attention, the climate crisis came knocking on your door directly, right? Because you've from Hurricane Katrina to a series of once in a 100 years, like a series of floods happened there. So I'm going to ask Jack if we've got this clip, because what y'all did is really worth paying attention to. Hit that clip, Jack.
It's just been Marshfield taking care of Marshfield.
The Marshfield Village store stepping up to provide food, water, and clothes to residents after the historic flooding.
For decades, it's been, the hub for the community, and it's very much still serving that function as a relief hub now.
Organizing volunteers, providing resources for help, and turning a store into a crisis center for all who need it.
The night of the storm, we ended up emergency sheltering like 36 or so, about 36 people here at the store, upstairs, in the store, in the parking lot.
But for 10 days, Marshfield was stuck without water or sewer. Community members donated water in the meantime. And some in the community say the state didn't provide enough water to help them get by.
There is a formal structure to request assistance from the State Emergency Operations Center.
With several concerned calls coming in from Marshfield, requests for help were not always going through the proper channels.
We were so clear. We could not have been clearer about the needs in our community. Crystal clear. clearer than the water that was coming out of those wells. And the failure of communication on their end is not our responsibility.
Commissioner of the Vermont Department of Public Safety, Jennifer Morrison, apologizing for wires getting crossed.
It was not my best public communication moment, and for that I apologize to the people of Marshfield.
Now, Marshfield seeing more donations and help from both the state and nonprofit organizations.
Going forward, some of our smaller towns, including Marshfield and their neighbors, are going to be receiving a proactive phone call from a dedicated liaison person that will check in on them on the daily to make sure that their process works.
We're just starting to emerge out of like the dire crisis state, but it's going to be a very long road to recovery.
In Marshfield, Sid Buley, NBC5 News.
So I want to bring in Michael Nugent's comment in the chat. And Michael is somebody I want to acknowledge that we know as I met Michael at an Eco-Socialism from Below event that actually happened there in Marshfield. But I love Michael's question, and that is there a connection between owning a store that also serves as central hub in the community and developing the local networks that can exist within the developing crisis of fascism and climate change? That seems like a setup question for both Mchelle and Kali.
Thanks, Michael. Yes. And that was absolutely, on our mind, like square one, because we were looking at this from a variety of angles about, how to see the project, where to see the project, and all of those things. And I had run the projections with some of the more recent tools that are out there for, quote, 100-year events and the risks for, 10, 20, 50, 100-year climate impacts. And while we are on the river here, and I hope I'm knocking on wood in case you're wondering what that sound is, but, we'd run the projections, and this store sits high enough and is elevated enough and with a flood wall in the back that it should be okay. And it proved to be okay in this particular instance. But it was also, from the mapping that I had done, the only place in town that could say that and could be a place where people could get to and people could come and could be a shelter of last resort. Our schoolhouse commons, like town offices, and that whole building becomes a moat. The fire station's on the river, doesn't have space, like we're it. And so I knew that. And when we were even looking at the store, and that was a strategic choice for us to take on that responsibility and that role, because that's who we are. And it's an amazing opportunity to build really deep connections with just a broad base of folks in the community in moments like this. It was, it's not my first rodeo. And there were more after Katrina, I'll have to say. But it never ceases to amaze me how awesome human beings actually are when we get down to it. We spend so much time on what comes down to just petty nonsense. And when it comes down to like real need, people are so much more often actually able to work collaboratively and in a way of like really giving.
So. Thank you for that. And I will confess that's also been my experience in a time of crisis. Coming from a rural background, hurricanes were a way of life. And, it didn't matter whether you liked somebody or not. During the hurricane, the community came together and took care of each other. Michael asked a follow-up question that I want you to address, Kali Akuno, because I think it's part of the vision that you had to bring together the People's Network for Land and Liberation. Michael has a follow-up question. What's the link between rural Vermont and the surrounding urban centers in developing the networks? Do you expect that Marshfield store will need to survive through multiple crises?
As a business, definitely. From a movement perspective, we are trying to build the infrastructure and the capacity for it to do just that, because it's our strategic thinking and planning that multiple crises are going to become more acute in a very short period of time. And we don't want folks to delude themselves in thinking that it's not, or that somehow we're going to kind of skip or avert some of the clear crises that we see right in front of our faces, developing basically now at the speed of light. So now we got to put some things into a particular context of your question. The largest city in Vermont is Burlington, and by New York standards, it's not even a borough. Okay, it's small, and so when we say kind of urban centers, you're talking more regional urban centers in effect. Uh, and perhaps correct me if I'm wrong, Mchelle, the largest urban center adjacent to Marshfield is actually Montreal, which is in Canada, right? And if we're thinking from a bioregional perspective, which we should be, we have to think about how does this fit? Where does Marshfield fit within the ecology of that it fits in, and to think beyond these artificial kind of national borders that have been constructed. And anybody who knows a little bit of Vermont history knows, that there's been a long time interchange of peoples in that region, indigenous peoples, but also some settlers, particularly the French, that have gone kind of back and forth within the kind of the natural kind of ecosystem and trade routes that exist within there. So I'm bringing this up to say that there's kind of two dimensions. There's one dimension of how do we sit ourselves within the kind of existing framework of production that's largely dictated by the capital's metro urban centers, right? And for that, you have Montreal, which plays a role, which has Boston, which plays a role. Then you have the behemoth of New York that plays a role. And you got to see Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine really is part of that kind of economic spill-off that comes from New York City. And that became, painfully acute during the housing crisis, when we see a whole bunch of folks from New York and Massachusetts buying up a lot of land, driving up the price quite artificially up in Vermont, which is creating a very acute housing crisis in Vermont. Even though there's kind of, from maybe a New York perspective, a ton of land, the actual number of viable housing units is actually fairly low. So there's two things I think that we have to, in our work, trying to be a center of a kind of a just transition program. We have to be mindful about, on the one hand, how do we increase kind of housing density without oversaturating the actual ecological footprint, the carbon footprint of Vermont. And that's a tricky thing to do if we're only allowed to operate within the existing parameters of quote unquote development dictated by capital and the real estate markets. So we're going to have to be both creative and determined and build a movement that is able to kind of enact these alternatives in terms of doing kind of off the grid housing, infusing that in with the community production components that we want to introduce more broadly up into the Vermont region, and then have very concrete value chains and supply chains that connect like the various urban areas with the rural areas with the intermediate small kind of towns in a very bioregionally determined strategy, Michael. That is fundamentally what we're trying to do as a setup. And then you got to add on that in top of that, one of the cute things of why I'm just going to speak to Wildlife Cooperation Jackson and our aim really got involved in this is that we're in no way, like me personally, I'm in no way giving up what I would call the new African territory or surrendering that, but also dealing with the reality that large portions of what we call that territory, which is the U.S., which is presently the U.S. Southeast, good chunks of that are going to be underwater very, very soon. And so there's going to be a rapid and acute climate-based migration towards the north in many regards. And we need to be kind of planting seeds so that migration, that population shift is one that is greeted with open arms, that is going to kind of aid the region in its kind of harmonious resetting, and not be met with a ton of white reaction. That's easier said than done, given the U.S. History of settler colonialism. But we are definitely trying to make the effort and be mindful of all of the lessons of the last 200 years to the greatest extent possible in trying to execute that. We're going to make mistakes. We've made a few already, but we're going to keep, plugging away, trying to get this right. And that is, I'm going to throw you a bone, Mchelle and David, and that is a critical piece as to, from our particular interest, where the Goddard piece in the kind of transition it appears to be going through, why it's so central to us and why we've been giving it so much focus over the course of the last month.
That's a bone with a lot of juicy meat on it. So what I'm going to do is kick it directly to you, Mchelle. And before we get to Goddard College itself, let's take a moment to understand the ongoing climate crisis, but also the crisis of neoliberalism itself and how that's impacting Vermont and the liberal arts schools that are a tradition in Vermont. I know that you were telling me, I was shocked, Mchelle, when you were actually telling me just how acute that problem is. So set the crisis for us about what's happening, not just with Goddard, but across Vermont with liberal arts colleges.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, I think, happening all over the U.S. And I was just reading that the changes in the federal student aid enrollment, programs have dropped, enrollments for next year by like really considerable amounts. And I'm anxious to see what the impacts are further for small liberal arts colleges. But Vermont alone, just recently, there are 4 that I'm aware of, including, the Vermont College of Fine Arts that's in Montpelier was the most recent one that I've heard of, that are closing their campuses. And some are, merging their programs with, online options. And then they're shifting their residency portion, their low residency programs to campuses somewhere else in the U.S., but their physical campuses are closing. And what happens to them, ends up being like a huge community question. And where are the resources, to do anything? What is the vision? What is the process? And who? And or are they just going to be these things that just get laid to waste in all towns across Vermont and the U.S.? Really, it's a question. And in the case of Goddard, I would have to say, because it's the very next town, super small towns, mind you, very next town over from where I'm physically located in Marshfield. It's the folks who, the legacy, I think, that Goddard College has had on this area. And I would say the Institute for Social Ecology as well, that used to be housed on the Goddard campus, but is still, based here in Marshfield, had a really, significant impact on both the politic and the culture in this area. And so, I can say that it really is a fertile place for this kind of work. And, it was 20 years ago that Goddard really went to a low residency model and actually sold off a portion of its campus. And since then, there's just been kind of it's ups and downs and ebbs and flows. But in the most recent period with, the bringing on of, the new administration and the enrollment going down further, and just the financial struggles that so many places are having right now, they made the decision about a month and a half ago, I think maybe a month ago, that they announced that they were, going to a completely online model and closing the campus entirely. And they're just, to mention that there are a couple of other organizations, including the Vermont Center for Integrated Herbalism, that's on campus now renting space. Our Central Vermont Public Radio, WGDR, is on campus with their tower, and also Maple Hill School, which is an alternative school that is really outdoor based and focused for kids that have a difficult time in a traditional classroom setting, like so many of us. So, aside from those pieces, and their future also is kind of up in the air in terms of like if they're going to continue to be there. But, otherwise they're closing the campus, and no real plan for that has been announced. But we know, because bad gas travels fast in a small town, that there have been other potential buyers who have come through the campus, at least in the last year. So while it's not at the moment listed for sale, like you're not going to find it on Zillow or something, but we know it's not for sale. And we went into conversations, very preliminarily with the CFO, who is working for an outsourced agency, like most of the administration actually is right now, for Goddard. It's a third-party company that provides services to small colleges. And so I mean, we had very much the inclination that they were open to an offer from us. And we, from our end, what we're looking to actually have happen is for this space that's actually, because it's been a low residency situation with not that much happening on campus for a very long time, and kind of a very long time of deferred maintenance as well, that there's a lot of space that's not cared for properly, and there's a lot that's underutilized. And to kind of turn that trend around and create a space, so we're calling it, our working group name right now is a Just Transition Campus. So to build on what's happening there with these entities, and to bring in additional projects that are operating under a large umbrella of just transition related projects, bring them into the same physical space and start to be much more deliberate in the ways that we can work together, collaborate, and kind of take those individual threads and weave them together into something that we hope will look like building community resilience. And so we hope it's going to continue to be a place of like learning and experimentation, and for building community resilience overall. In our end, that would be the space that which is how we originally ended up in conversation with folks at Goddard. We're looking for space to develop a community production center similar to what Cooperation, somewhere between what Cooperation Jackson is doing and what Insight Focus and Idlewild is doing, with the focus on being able to develop net zero affordable housing. The whole story.
So I'm going to bring Kali in to talk a little bit more about the Just Transition Campus idea and really flesh that out, right? Because this is 200 acres with buildings that have a lot of deferred maintenance, but y'all have a vision to not just bridge the so-called town gown dynamic that happens, the gown being the college campus with the commencement gowns and so forth, and the town, of course, being the townspeople. You're talking about obliterating it. You're talking about doing something with that physical plant and campus that's truly transformational and revolutionary. So my challenge to you, Kali, is what does a Just Transition Campus look like at Goddard College?
Well, part of it is going to be first entailing its own history, but then a deeper history relative to the indigenous Abenaki people of that area, right? And there's some extensive work we're going to have to do in terms of extending and developing relationships there. And this is despite some of the controversy that is surrounding that particular community right now. So, it's some challenges to navigate it, but we're going to navigate it as best we can. Now the long-term aim and objective is to have it be, self-operating, self-managing, and making sure that its operations are being conducted so that there's both zero waste and zero emissions. And we're not talking about like offsets through false kind of climate markets or being involved in carbon, things of that manner. But actually developing core practices that enable us to both draw from the natural environment and give back to the natural environment in a sustainable dynamic. And this is something that many communities in Vermont are already working on. Some have some advanced practice at that. And we're going to be in relationship with a good number of folks who are working towards that end, including like the herbalist school, which is already there. Many of the farmers who are already in the region working towards that end. The potential of a broad kind of educational school that would operate from there, that would be directly connected with La Via Campesina and the broad kind of agroecology process that it's involved in, where there's been an effort going on now for about the last 2 years to really land the North American school in Vermont. And so hopefully this will be something that will enable that to move and go forward. And then I think the particular piece that Cooperation Jackson and Cooperation Vermont are really trying to bring in, and that is this element of community production. And that we're trying to bring in through, in part, is just to name it, the stewardship of a broad kind of eco-fab lab orientation, that we are learning through a process of collaboration with Inside Focus through a network that we are currently co-constructing called the People's Network for Land and Liberation. And part of what we want to do in utilizing this technology right now, if you look at some aspects of what people call digital fabrication, it is highly kind of dependent upon oil-based resins, but the way its trajectory is heading, and we want to be part of this curve of experimenting and building this out, it's not limited to that by any stretch of the imagination. We can start using different forms of biomass to produce what we need in conjunction with what each natural environment will entail, and build what we need in a way that eventually things will biodegrade and feed back into the environment, thus eliminating that kind of carbon cycle. And we're very clear this is going to be a fundamental shift to how things are done now, but we are also very clear that a fundamental shift, a deep shift, is needed. So these are just some of the basics of what we are trying to bring into this equation, but there's also a deep level of work that we're going to have to do, just kind of within the community, so this doesn't just become a kind of a closed off, small, little isolated section of the community. We need to do this in a way that everyone is learning through direct engagement how to do these things, and that's going to take some struggle. But I think this is where, going back to like Michael's earlier question, this is where the crisis that Vermont has already experienced, like with the flood that happened, direct experience with climate change. Vermont had been, I would say, Mchelle, is probably still technically in a drought, right? It's still kind of technically going through. Not anymore.
No.
Declared that over.
Yeah, we done took care of that apparently.
Well,
but 2 more feet of snow supposedly on Thursday.
The seasons are still off. Like the snowpack is not.
Yeah, so that's a question with us not having a normal snowpack. I think everything is like, we're still trying to figure it out. What does it mean?
So we are going to be trying to figure this all out together, basically.
And by together, I want to take this moment because we're running out of time, and I want to be clear. By together, you mean Cooperation Jackson, Cooperation Vermont, the Land Trust, and the community of Marshfield, and the faculty, alumni, staff of Goddard. I mean, something magical could come out of this. Mchelle, I got to ask you, where are things with the Goddard Board of Trustees?
So we communicated first with the CFO and then sent a full, introduction and request to the Board of Trustees to enter into a period of negotiations and with deposit, and that we were, prepared to make, a meaningful offer. We do have a copy of the most recent appraisal, which, I can say this, because it was shared in other circles, that it was 3.4 million was the most recent appraisal. And, but there's a lot of deferred maintenance, which is why, we are setting out with a $5 million campaign for this. But, we're prepared to make them an offer. And, we have to go through a due diligence period, probably getting another appraisal of our own and that kind of thing. And so, we put that out there to them and are kind of waiting to hear back. It's been a little bit of radio silence, which is odd for a campus that seems to have been on the market, even though it's not officially.
So again, what I want to do is for listeners, viewers, readers of Redneck Gone Green, be very clear. If you go to our Substack, you'll see the opportunity for you to make a direct contribution towards the purchase of Goddard College to support Cooperation Vermont and Cooperation's Vermont Community Land Trust, because y'all already have multiple properties in motion that you're taking off of the speculative market, right? So, Mchelle, where can people, if they are inspired to make a contribution to Cooperation Vermont, to the Land Trust, where do they go?
Yeah, they can go to the Cooperation Vermont, allspelledout.org website, and there's a news page. And then the first post is, our efforts for Goddard, which links to our co-fundraising campaign with Cooperation Jackson.
So y'all, this hour has just flown by. I'm going to give you each a chance for final words. I'll go to Kali first, then you, Mchelle. But before I do, I want to remind folks, y'all, you're listening and or watching Redneck Gone Green. We are a source of non-corporately filtered news, information, and analysis. I'm going to be really explicit. We have unsanctioned conversations on this program. We have the kind of conversations that the ruling elite try very hard to prevent ordinary people from having one another. This audience is growing. You are part of it. I'm going to make the plea that I make every week and that you hear every podcaster, broadcaster, citizen journalist make. Please like, subscribe, and share. That's because the only way to break through the algorithms and the shadow banning and all the efforts that they make to prevent us from growing, we are growing nonetheless. We literally have over 4,000 subscribers on Substack. So if you want to read, go to Substack. That's probably the best place. But we're also on YouTube, on Facebook, on Rumble. Please join this growing community in order to build the peaceful, just, democratic, and ecological sustainable world we so desperately need and so richly deserve. And so with that, I'm going to kick it to you, Kali, for any final thoughts to our audience.
We ain't got enough time to touch on all the different things I might want to touch on. So I will leave you with this, and the audience with this. I'm looking forward to being on Redneck Gone Green on a monthly basis, which is what me and David committed to. I think, I was having some health challenges, been having some health challenges with the long, bout of COVID. Hopefully we've got a prescription now on how to deal with that more adequately. And I'm looking forward to getting into some deep conversation over the course of this next month. And I really want to push everybody to start thinking programmatically beyond the fear of the sky is falling because Donald Trump, more likely is going to get elected. And for us to start thinking and acting programmatically on how do we deal with, the dual threat of the neoliberals who enable fascism and the actual fascists who are on the move. We got to deal with both sides of that particular coin in order to build the world we need. So looking forward to being on to chop that up with folks and build some momentum towards that end.
Ain't nobody going to free us but ourselves. Mchelle Eddlman McCormick, what are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts, I was looking at somebody's comment. It was Catherine's very exciting and hopeful show. And just to thank you for that comment, and for people, to have hope. And to, like some days it feels like the sky is falling, and, to just be busy doing what we can actually and practically with the people that are closest around physically to us. And, to get to work, really building the things that we're going to need for the future.
So, look here, I think it's important, it is appropriate to be fearful of a climate catastrophe and ecological collapse, economic collapse, and rising fascism. But I'm going to quote Frank Herbert of Dune, and with a hat tip to Kali Akuno, who quoted this to me when we were together, and I thought it was really valuable. Here's the quote: "I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings me total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it is gone, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain." And the only thing that I would add is, it's not just me, y'all. It is we. We face this fear together. Humans have been through moments like this before. We'll get through it together. Thank you so much. Peace.